Okay, now that the recording's on, let's do a little bit of practice together. So sit with your head, neck, and trunk aligned. Make yourself comfortable. And as you gradually withdraw your mind from all the space around you, feel the space your body occupies. The cave of space in which you live and move, and which is the most sacred temple on the face of the earth. Feel the flow and the touch of the breath in your nostrils, the winds of prana on the wings of breath, cleansing with the exhaling breath, energizing with the inhaling breath. And the moment your mind turns back to that attention, in that moment of repentance, of turning around, your breath automatically begins to become smoother and longer and more subtle. And just allow those natural changes to continue. No need to push. Breathe as if your whole body breathes. And as your breath gradually begins to self-correct and assume its natural state, your body also begins to relax, to surrender its vigilant tension, to release the grip in your musculature. And let your kind and mindful attention assist that process by feeling inside the top of your head and your forehead. Feeling inside any tightness you find until the muscles just let go. And feel around your eyes and eyebrows, into your cheeks and the corners of your mouth. Corners of your jaw. Feel the muscles in your neck. And from your throat center, feel out along your shoulders toward your fingertips, through your upper arms, and through your forearms, your hands, your fingers, and fingertips. And let your breath flow free and deep. Relax your fingertips and feel back into your fingers. Release your fingers as if they could just float away. To feel back into your hands. Let your hands go. Feel back into your forearms. Release your forearms. Release your upper arms. And your shoulders. And from your throat center, feel down into your chest. Relax your upper chest and upper back. Muscles between your ribs. Relax your rib cage. And feel into the center of your chest. Exhaling and inhaling. Free and deep. Relax the center of your chest. Feel down into your abdomen. Relax your navel center. Feel down into your hip joints. Your gluteal muscles. Relax your thighs. Feel down into your calves and lower legs. Your feet. And your toes. Feel the whole body breathe. Whole body at peace. Now feel that flow of breath and prana between your navel and your nostrils. As you observe that gentle wave, just listen. Let your mantra come to you, or your favorite divine name or psalm. Gentle song flowing with the breath and the mind, drawing your mind more and more still. Feel that flow along the bridge of your nose, between the eyebrow center and nasagra, where the nose bridge meets the upper lip. Mantra sound resonating in that space. Feel the flow of breath, mind, and mantra through the left hand channel in the left nostril. Feel that flow through the right hand channel in the right nostril. Let go of left and right and sink between these two into the Sushumna stream. Breath may become quite subtle. Just follow the presence of the mantra in whatever way. As syllables, as a feeling, or even just a vibration, a pulsation. Now, see where the Shakti calls to a silent chamber or to a chakra, or perhaps along the spinal path, or into a metta meditation. Follow where the mantra presence takes you. And now let the mantra thought arise again. Gently rippling your calm mind. And let that vibration merge in the flow of breath from head to toe. And let your whole mind become full of that sound. Keeping this awareness. Let your palms come before your face. And your eyes gently open. Let your heart fill your palms with fragrant blossoms of gratitude. And with thanks to the Guru Force, joining us heart to heart and coming to us moment to moment with every breath we take. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Namaste, everybody.
Namaste.
Lovely to see everyone there. And tonight I just want to briefly honor the memory of our friend Dale Bugle, who left the body recently and did so beautifully, just beautifully. Wesley was good enough to send around some stories that he asked to be shared after he had left the body, and around in the emails. But
Buffalo and
yeah, Dale was such a wonderful teacher, and what was just so lovely about his teaching was that he decided that he wouldn't teach anything that Swami Rama had not taught him personally. And I think that's really a valuable experiential lesson for us all and was very helpful to me. So off you go into the light, Dale. We'll see you again sometime. One way or another, our paths will cross. Which brings us to Bodhi-carya-avatara. Before we launch off into whatever we're going to do this evening, any questions or comments or thoughts that you have had in the intervening couple of weeks? Hey, Jan, good to see you. I have had last Tuesday a successful implantation of a Watchman device in my left atrium. Another little medical adventure that fortunately all of the medical procedures I've had this year have been improvements in my quality of life rather than pathogenic episodes. This device is one that was developed by Boston Scientific. Thank you, Paul Emerson, and your friends, which stops the formation of clots that go into your heart to create widowmaker heart attacks or to create strokes in your brain, so that it's possible with this device implanted to withdraw from anticoagulant medications, which are kind of a nuisance. So I'm grateful for that. In about a month or so, I should be able to discontinue those medications. So everything went really smoothly, and I had a nice day of napping in the hospital as I recovered. Took them an hour and a half to prepare me for that procedure, and the whole thing took 10 minutes to actually do. So it was pretty quick. And to anybody with atrial fibrillation that's not occasional, I recommend it. So we got through the first chapter nicely, and I can't remember, I don't remember if we got very far into chapter 2, but I think that's where I'm going to start here. Um, in the last couple of verses, the whole first chapter was Shantideva really singing the virtues of bodhi-citta and its awakening in our mind. And so he opens the second chapter with confession, which is, of course, an interesting concept for those of us with a Christian upbringing. And there are a couple of ways that this discussion of confession, I think, needs to be contextualized for those who are raised in that tradition. And we'll sort of do that as we go along. There are some of the Buddhist ways of talking about this that I think are difficult for people who have been raised in a certain theological understanding, but we'll come to it here. So, Children says, in chapter 2 of the Way of the Bodhisattva, Shantideva introduces the sevenfold offerings, 7 practices that prepare the mind and heart for awakening. These are traditional methods for gathering merit. And Shantideva begins in verse 1 with the practice of making offerings. Now, when in the Buddhist tradition they talk about gathering merit, it's not just a matter of gathering pure sanskaras, as we would think of them in the yoga tradition. Because in order to be enlightened, we have to go even beyond the pure sanskaras. We have to go beyond all sanskaras. We have to go beyond purity. Purity is not enough. And I think a lot of times, and this is something that also I think is part of the residue of a Judeo-Christian upbringing, is we think about the process of spiritual growth as simply becoming more and more pure. And that's really not the case. At a certain point, you have to let go of that. And sometimes, Swami Veda used to say, when a guru sees that a disciple is too good, I grew up being the good boy. I was too good for my own good. Yeah. He said sometimes a guru will send a disciple out to throw rocks at people and do bad stuff to balance their mind a little bit. And so in these discussions, when they start talking about good things and evil things, I think it's important for us to sort of lift the moral overlay of all of that we carry with us in order to understand how that works within the system of karma. And he begins with the process of making offerings, which is, as he said in the first chapter, a wonderful way to begin to open your heart up. So in the first verse, Shantideva says to the Buddhas, those thus gone. And it's interesting, the Sanskrit term there is Tathagata. And Tathagata there are 2 ways you can break the sandhis in that word. You can have Tathagata, which means thus gone, and you can have Tathagata, which means thus come. It's paradoxical, which is kind of cool. So the Buddhas are thus gone, but also thus come. They have gone in their bodily life, having attained nirvana, but they come to us at each moment in the opportunity to awaken our bodhi-citta and for us to become bodhisattvas. So to the Buddhas, those thus gone and thus come, and to the sacred law, immaculate, supreme, and rare, and to the Buddha's offspring, oceans of good qualities, that I may gain this precious attitude, I make a perfect offering. Now, once again, he begins the chapter by making the three salutations the to the Buddha, to the Dharma, and to the Sangha. And she notes here that this special object being offered here is the three jewels. And this is the first part of opening our heart in a way to become a bodhisattva, to begin to enter into an attitude that gets us beyond our selfishness. Now, this is where our deconditioning our Christianity becomes important a little bit. In Christianity, there is this sort of moral theological point that was made by Augustine. Augustine is the doctor of the church that originated the idea of so-called original sin. And my own opinion about this is that this was the theological error on Augustine's part, because the way that it has been understood down the centuries is that human beings are born inherently bad, inherently evil, inherently flawed. And we know at the core of our being, there is a spark of divinity that is untouched, that is untrammeled by anything. So the core of the human being is a spark of divinity that is beyond anything we can call good and evil. Now, what Augustine was trying to do there was to describe this habit that we human beings have of constantly turning towards our pleasures and our aversions, towards our desires and the way they condition our life. You know, this is the way that we get into bondage, by allowing our desires to draw us into the process of creating our karma, of creating our sanskaras. The mindful life that Shantideva is trying to get us to lead asks us to turn away from that habit, that very strong, persuasive habit that human beings have. But that is not our nature. That's not our nature. Our nature is divinity. Our origin is divinity. We're not originally sinful. We are originally divine. And we happen to have a few nasty habits. What Trungpa used to call neurotic crimes, which I think is a wonderful term. Our tendency to pursue our passions instead of keeping our mind turned towards joy. It's this difference that we talk about in yoga between living a life of the satisfaction of desires versus a life of mindful awareness, which replaces the pursuit of pleasure with the pursuit of joyfulness that is a pure celebration. It has no desire in it. It is a celebration of the beauty of everything around us, which I like to characterize as the real practice of Sri Vidya. And Shantideva is going to get into this a little down the road here. But this is the way that one of the ways that I think we need to footnote our Christian upbringing as we go into the language of what he's presenting here. So this offering that we make of our mindful awareness is what helps us to unlock our heart, to pull us away from self-absorption, to pull us away from our pursuit of mere pleasure and into the pursuit of joy that expands eventually infinitely outward. Children says on page 26 at the bottom there, whatever moves us beyond self-centeredness sows positive seeds in our mind stream. It doesn't just sow positive seeds. At first, that's true, but it eventually sows the seeds of transcendence as well. With the right causes and conditions, these seeds will blossom into fortunate circumstances. In other words, it creates the good karma that allows us to have a life conducive to spiritual practice. This good fortune is called merit and manifests as supportive outer conditions and mental states. The ultimate merit comes from connecting with the unbiased clarity of our mind. And that's the point where in meditation, we end up going eventually beyond even merit. When we side with our sanity instead of the small-mindedness of self-absorption, we gather merit. This is a heartfelt way of making friends with oneself. It's a really nice way to put it. And, people struggle with this so much. People are so self-critical. In many ways, I think it's the problem that I see people struggle with more and more. It's so hard for people sometimes to make a friend of themselves. And Trungpa goes on here to say, the person who collects the most merit has to be humble and willing to give rather than willing to collect. So it's not a matter of becoming greedy for good karma, Some people approach it all that way. And he gave a little example of this in the previous chapter. The person who gives a little bit to one beggar on the street and thinks that that's fulfilled their duty to generosity. So in the second verse, he says, I offer every fruit and flower and every kind of healing medicine and all the precious things the world affords with all pure waters of a refreshment. Every mountain rich and filled with jewels, all sweet and lonely forest groves, the trees of heaven garlanded with blossom, and branches heavy, laden with their fruit. The perfumed fragrance of the realms of gods and men, all incense, wishing trees, and trees of gems. Now, he's talking about spiritual things. You can see how the scope of the offerings is gradually expanding here. All crops that grow without the tiller's care, and every sumptuous object worthy to be offered. Lakes and mares adorned with lotuses. Mares is another word for a body of water. All plaintive with the sweet-voiced cries of water birds, and lovely to the eyes, and all things wild and free. In other words, the great treasure of what the Japanese call nature bathing, when you go out into the trees and allow that whole ecology to refresh your being, stretching to the boundless limits of the sky. I hold them all before my mind, and to the supreme Buddhas and all heirs will make a perfect gift to them. Oh, think of me with love, compassionate lords, sacred objects of my prayers, accept my offerings, accept these offerings. For I am empty-handed, destitute of merit. I have no other wealth. But you, protectors, you whose thoughts are for the good of others, in your great power, accept this for my sake. There was a guy who lived here in Minneapolis for some time, Swami Atma. He was a disciple of Swami Shivananda of Rishikesh, the same Shivananda that we know from so many books and the formation of the Divine Life Society. He was a really interesting guy, and I'm very sorry to say I never went to any of the satsangas he used to hold every week here. But people really enjoyed them. And I got to know him after he moved from Minneapolis and he went to San Francisco. He was living with our friend Praful Saklani. And Praful happened to live in a house just a stone's throw from the people I used to stay with when I would visit San Francisco to do programs out there in the mission. So we decided to have dinner one night when Swami Atma was there. And I walked up to the house and we spent a really lovely evening. And what an interesting person he was. He told all kinds of stories about living in Shivananda's ashram. he was he did not find his fellow swamis to be very friendly people. He said those Advaita Vedantins were pretty unfriendly. They kept to themselves all the time, and all they ever did was talk about Vedanta. And they were not very friendly people. So I found the one Swami in the whole place who understood the Divine Mother and the path of Tantra, and I became his student. So his path was completely different from the sort of path that Shivananda taught to most of his disciples. And he really became a follower of the Divine Mother. And his sadhana, his practice, was to, just as Shantideva has done in these last few verses, to go through his life glorying in everything that crossed his path and constantly inside giving thanks to the Divine Mother for the beauty all around him. He was practicing a very practical form of Sri Vidya, not an abstruse intellectual exercise with all kinds of complicated texts and philosophy and, all that stuff that's in the books, which is fine if that's what you're interested in. But there's a practical way to do this. Turn your mind around. Look at all of the beauty around you. Rather than pursuing your appetites, pursue that beauty. See that beauty in everything and look especially hard at the ugly things. Because if you look especially hard at the ugly things, you get the great gift of confronting your fear. And letting your fear teach you some of the hardest lessons in your life. If you can do that, then the world becomes a mirror to the whole architecture of your unconscious mind. It becomes a way for you to see what's in there and also to see and celebrate the beauty all around you, which you can then offer in the spirit that Shantideva makes his offerings to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Thank you, Mother, for all of this wealth in my life, and I give it all to you. This is what is meant by repentance. Repentance is not accepting a burden of shame and living as some kind of a bad person, which is how so many people think of that. As if repentance were a matter of, beating yourself with a cat of nine tails or some such thing. That's not repentance, that's self-punishment. What Shantideva is teaching people is to learn to escape this hair shirt of shameful self-blame that we so often wear in our lives. And by doing that, learn to see the beauty that's in the world and that is in you. Turn your mind around. That's what repent literally, as a Latin term, means to turn around, turn back. Turn back to the light, turn back to the joy. The desires, the appetites, they're going to tug at you all your life. Yeah, they'll always be there. Yep. But you gradually, over time, strengthen the habit of turning back towards the joy and the beauty that's around you in the world, and that is there at the core of who you are as a human being. So when they talk about repentance here, just be clear. It's not about accepting the burden of shameful self-blame. It's about shedding that It's about seeing the ways that you may fall short clearly and creating a sankalpa, an intention to not do that further. Children continues on page 28. These first offerings of nature's bounty, fruits and flowers, waters, mountains, trees, can't be owned. They could be made by the poorest of the poor. We could offer the sky the sound of birdsong or the pleasure of seeing a sunrise. Like Shantideva, we could joyfully make vast and wondrous offerings of everything we see, hear, taste, and smell, every sumptuous object we enjoy. It's a great word, enjoyment, enfolding your whole life in joy, in celebration of the beauty around you, and in offering that joyfulness to other beings. By seizing these moments of delight, we always have a precious gift on hand. Even if we're living on the streets, empty-handed, destitute of merit, and with no other wealth, as Shantideva says, we are rich with priceless gifts because we appreciate the world and perceive its available abundance. I come to you that you may live life and live it more abundantly, Jesus says. We can offer this to others. Instead of desirable things becoming objects of greed, we turn them into vehicles of liberation by using them to make the best of offerings. Verse 2:8, to the Buddhas and their Bodhisattva children, I offer them myself throughout my lives. Supreme courageous ones, accept me totally. For with devotion I will be your servant. For if you will accept me, I will be a benefit to all, and freed from fear, I'll go beyond the evils of my past and ever turn my face from them. And by evils here, we simply mean the ways we have fallen short, the mistakes that we've made, and our intentions to remedy those mistakes. In verses 8 and 9, children says, Shantideva offers himself. His reasoning is practical. Anything that lures us out of self-centeredness bodes well. At the everyday level, we can literally offer ourselves. In a meeting, for instance, someone might say, we need an extra person to work late. When we feel the familiar tug of resistance, we could offer ourselves, even though it takes a leap. Once we determine to free ourselves from our fear-based habits, opportunities to practice will arise everywhere. That's so important. So important. Because this habit of pursuing our desires is fear-based. It's based on that fear we have of losing our dwelling, so-called fear of death, but it isn't really fear of death. It's fear of losing our habitual dwelling. So in this life, in the practice of yoga, for example, we sit down every day and we practice letting go of our dwelling. First, we relax the body, then we relax the mind. And if you look carefully at the language with which we do these practices, it's the same language as some of the meditation practices in the Buddhist canon, where they look at the body as nothing but a corpse, and they take each part of the corpse and pull it off the body and throw it away. I mean, I just say, let go of your fingers as if they could just float away, which is a nice hypnotic image. But it's also an invitation to let go. Allow the body to be the corpse that it is. Your body's already a corpse. Your body's already a corpse. The fact that there's prana running through it keeps it renewing itself all the time, for a while, for a few years, maybe, hopefully, a few decades. But eventually that process will cease. And if you have lived your life preparing to let your body go, then it's not such a big deal when the time comes. It's easier to let go. And it's also easier to let go of the way that that fear of losing our habitus pushes us towards our appetites. If I pursue the pleasure of filling my body with food, I'll live another day. No, if I have a good sexual experience tonight, I'll be good for the next couple of days, right? Keep this body going. Yeah, well, for a while. So you can see here the connection between the life of appetites and our fearfulness. And the more we look into those experiences in our life, and we're coming to the part about confession, the more we're able to see where we can do better. Children continues, of course, Shantideva is not addressing coworkers or friends. He's addressing the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Yet in truth, we're not doing this for the Buddhas. When Shantideva offers himself to those who embody wisdom and compassion, he is the one who will benefit. The Buddhas don't need us to be their servants. On the other hand, who wouldn't rejoice to see us lightening up and becoming less stingy and possessive? Making offerings frees us from the pain of self-absorption. Are we willing to offer something as precious as our time, our energy, and anything else we're hanging on to? Are we willing to loosen up habits of selfishness, fear, and small-mindedness? If so, we can greatly benefit from this practice. When she was working as Swami Rama's personal, or Swami Veda's personal secretary in Rishikesh, my friend Joanne Sullivan, whom many of you know, said that people would constantly gift Swami Veda beautiful, expensive pens, and he loved them, and he loved writing with them. Beautiful writing instruments. Had a whole drawer full of them. And so sometimes he'd be sitting there writing something with one of his pens, and somebody would admire the pen, and he would just give it to them. These things were worth sometimes hundreds of dollars, and he'd just give it to them. And Swami Rama did the same thing. People used to criticize Swami Rama for collecting all these beautiful objects around him. They never saw him passing these things along to other people with his other hand, which he did continually. So Shantideva goes on with describing these wonderful gifts that he's going to make. A bathing chamber, excellently fragrant, with floors of crystal radiant and clear, with graceful pillars shimmering with gems, all hung with gleaming canopies of pearls. There the blissful Buddhas and their heirs, I'll bathe with many a precious vase, abrim with water, sweet and pleasant, all to frequent strains of melody and song. With cloths of unexampled quality, with peerless perfumed towels I will dry them, and offer splendid scented clothes, well dyed and of surpassing excellence. With different garments, light and supple, and 100 beautiful adornments, I will grace sublime Samantabhadra, Manjughosha, Lokeshvara, and their kin. He's naming some of the principal bodhisattvas in the Mahayana way of thinking about the various Buddhas. In verses 10 and 11, he describes an exquisite bathing chamber. Verses 12 and 13, he offers excellent cloth. All things we would covet in the catalogs, she says. We can delight in our daydreams and then give it all away. Order these wonderful things and then have the wonderful experience of giving them to someone else and enjoying their joy. Swamiji used to do this with me all the time. One of his big deals with me was about food sadhana. I've always been a hefty person. And I would sit at his dinner table and I would work on being very disciplined and, eat very moderately. And he'd scowl at me from across the table. He'd say, look, you can be austere when you go home. When you're in here, you eat and you enjoy it because I'm enjoying your enjoyment. So it was really good dinner. He had a wonderful cook. So that was a good thing. These gifts are offered to 3 of the 8 main bodhisattvas: Samantabhadra, Manjughosha, Lokeshwara. Samantabhadra is associated with boundless generosity. Samantabhadra is well-being, endless well-being. Manjughosha is another name for Manjushri, who is the Buddha of wisdom. And Manjushri is basically the same as Saraswati in the yoga system. And the same bija mantra, for example, is the bija mantra for Saraswati, Manjushri, Jesus and Mary in the Christian tradition, Doma in the Tibetan tradition, Mahayana Buddhism, blocking the name, but you get the idea. In fact, one of the most important tantric Saraswati mantras, the Vagbhava mantra, is the same mantra in Hinduism as it is in Buddhism. They have the same. Manjushri's mantra is basically a Saraswati mantra. So this makes it easy, for doing work with mantras with Buddhist people who need initiation. So she goes on, this is a quality we too possess, a mind of generosity with infinite potential to grow. Manjughosha manifests the unconditional wisdom that is available to us all. Lokeshwara, and this is Avalokiteshvara, embodies compassion. We venerate him knowing that our own compassion can develop and expand. I have some thought that there is a tradition that in the 7th century, oh no, I'm blocking another name of, hang on a second. Well, we'll come back to this when the name comes to me. Shantideva continues, and with a sumptuous fragrance that pervades 1,000 million worlds, I will anoint the bodies of the Buddhas, light and gleaming bright like pure burnished gold. I will place before the Buddha, perfect object of my worship, flowers like the lotus and the mandara, utpala, and other scented blossoms, worked and twined in lovely scented garlands. I will offer swelling clouds of incense, whose ambient perfume ravishes the mind, and various foods and every kind of drink and delicacies worthy of the gods. I will offer precious lamps, all perfectly contrived as golden lotuses, a bed of flower petals scattering upon the level incense-sprinkled ground. All these offerings, these gorgeous offerings, are the things we offer in worship. The fragrance of incense represents the earth element and also the element of air. The Flowers represent the element of space because they open and close in space. The lamps, the light represents the element of fire. All of the waters that he's washing the Buddhas in represent the elements of water. So these are all things that are common to divine worship in many different traditions. You know, when Swami Veda explained the meaning of the things on the altar in a Christian mass, I understood. It's a tantric puja, basically. Jesus was a big tantric without having to use the word. So anything
Can
we
you elaborate on that?
elaborate on
The Catholic
the
altar.
yeah, flowers on the altar representing the space element, incense of the representing fragrance. We have also the wafting of incense representing the air element. You have the water and the wine representing both the vital waters that support all life and the vital water that supports the life of our body in the form of blood, symbolized by the wine in the communion. So all of these aspects of Christian worship are basically the same as the things that we offer in a tantric puja. In some of the tantric, now that's a 5-element puja, panchopachara it's called. Now there's also the 16-element puja that has all sorts of other stuff. You offer them a throne and clothing and a sacred thread. And, you know, we've seen these rituals done by the pundits, for example, when they do a sannyasa ritual or when they do the big ritual on Shivaratri, then they do the more expanded version of it. But these are all invocations of this experience of beauty, of living a mindful life. And often when I'm explaining, for example, our Sanskrit prayers to our teacher training students, I usually tell them, you know, this is not just a matter of begging God in a certain language. These prayers in the life of a Brahmin frame every moment of a Brahmin's waking day, starting from the moment you open your eyes when you wake up. There's a prayer for that. Samudravasane Devi, Parvatastana Mandale. I always forget the third part of that verse, and then the end of it is Pada Sparshak Shamaswame. Oh, ocean-robed, mountain-breasted goddess, please forgive the touch of my foot as I get out of bed, is basically what the prayer says. And then you go to take your bath. Gange cha Yamune chaiva Godavari Saraswati Kaveri Narmade Sindhu Jalesmin Sanidin Kuru. All the sacred rivers of India, all the sacred waters of the world, please make a confluence in this bath for me. Make this Ganga for me. When we eat, we make the prayer to Annapurna. Annapurne Sadapurne. Shankara Pranavallabhe. Jnana Vairagya Siddhyartham. Bhikshan Dehi Cha Parvati. Mata tu Parvati Devi. And so on and so forth. So these prayers are there so that at every moment you have a reminder. Turn around, turn around, turn your mind around. Be mindful. See the beauty around you. See the beauty that's unfolding before your eyes this moment. Give thanks for that, and then give it away. Give it to somebody else. So I think that makes the point about the tantric nature of Christian worship. I think, right, Cynthia?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I think you forgot the candle.
Oh, the candle, sure. Fire element, of course. So she says, starting with verse 15, the offerings take on special significance. Traditionally, each offering is understood to cultivate a specific quality. The offering of flowers, for example, increases our ability to feel love and compassion. The offering of incense in verse 16 increases the capacity for discipline. These are Buddhist puja practices. Anything we offer uncovers our inherent good qualities. It's like removing a lid. As a result, we might feel immersed in richness and find ourselves being less possessive and more generous, serving the work of the yama of asteya, non-stealing, which is not about being non-possessive, but rather about what we define to be mine. We celebrate the beauty of this thing in front of us, and then we say, namama, not mine. Here, enjoy this. We offer it, we give it to someone. Cultivating this practice is a very straightforward, non-conceptual way to uncover our basic goodness. 218, I will offer palaces, immense and resonant with song, all decked with precious pearls and pendant gems, gleaming treasures fit to adorn the amplitude of space. All this I offer to the loving bodhisattvas, precious parasols adorned with golden shafts, and bordered all around with jeweled fringes, upright, well-proportioned, and pleasing to the eye. Again, all this I give to the Buddha, to all the Buddhas. May a multitude of other offerings, accompanied by music sweet to hear, be made in great successive clouds to soothe the sufferings of living beings. I offer this and I give it. I offer this and I give it. I celebrate and then I give it away. May rains of flowers, every precious thing fall down in an unceasing stream upon the jewels of sacred Dharma, the triple gem, and all supports for offering. And Shantideva goes on. Just as Manjughosha, gentle and melodious, made offerings to all the conquerors, likewise I will make oblation to the Buddhas and their bodhisattva children. I will offer prayers by every way and means to these vast oceans of good qualities. May clouds of tuneful praise ascend unceasingly before them. To the Buddhas of the past, the present, and all future time, and to the doctrine and sublime assembly, with bodies many as the grains of dust upon the ground, I will prostrate and bow. To shrines and all supports of bodhi-citta I bow down. All abbots who transmit the vows, all learned masters, and all noble ones who practice dharma. Until the essence of enlightenment is reached, I go for refuge to the Buddhas, and also I take refuge in the doctrine and all the host of bodhisattvas. In South Korea, the temples, which are very much supported by the state, even though there are vast numbers of Christian people in South Korea, the South Korean government supports all religions. They support their Buddhist temples beautifully. And there's a government program called the Temple Stay Program, where you go for usually 3 days and you live in a traditional temple in a monastic setting. They give you basically a monastic garment, a gi, like you would use in karate to wear. And you live the life of the monks. You go for prayers at 3 a.m, and they teach you a number of rituals that the monks use in the course of their daily life. In particular, they teach you the tea ceremony, because every time you talk to a monk, you have a tea ceremony. And the conversation is always happening around the offering of tea. And they also teach you the practice of 108 prostrations to Buddha. It takes about 40 minutes. And I tell you, that is a workout. We did this. our hosts in South Korea took us to a temple stay, one of the first times we were there, in this lovely temple east of Wonju in the northern part of South Korea called Wojansong. And the person who was doing the temple stay taught us this 108 prostrations to Buddha, so we followed along and did them. Ashutosh was there and Swami Rithavan and several of our students from the Korean group. And so we did these prostrations, and at the end, the next day, we were so sore. You don't usually see Ashutosh Sharma walking around saying, oh, ouch, oh, that hurts, owie, 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 going up and down stairs. But we were all in such pain after doing this. It was very rigorous, even though it wasn't particularly, it wasn't a tough exercise program, but it ended up being a very strong workout. And we were in such physical pain that day that our host decided to have pity on us when the temple stay was done. So they took us to a bathhouse that was sort of like what was described in Shantideva's verses. It was lovely. Those of you who know Korean culture may know that bathhouses are very, very common in Korea, and communal bathing is a huge tradition all over Asia in various ways. And it is a wonderful thing. I just absolutely love it. But that 108 prostrations was really something. So yes, it's a process of intentionally surrendering your self-absorption in the process of doing the prostration, and it does begin to open you up a little bit, for sure. It begins to open you up. It also begins to make you more generous. And it creates a sort of mental habit for what happens spontaneously when you actually encounter someone who is a Buddha or a Bodhisattva. When you come in the presence of someone who is genuinely spiritually charged, enlightened, or nearly enlightened, your heart automatically makes you bow. You can't help yourself. You come into Swami Rama's presence, you can't help but bow. This is the sort of thing that would happen. You step into the atmosphere of peacefulness that surrounded him, and you forget all your questions. Sometimes people would even forget their name. It was remarkable how that would happen. And I realized this is a natural impulse in people. One time we were doing a teacher training in Burkina Faso in French West Africa. And our host had arranged for us to meet a very interesting fellow. He was the Catholic Archbishop of the second city of Burkina, Bobo Dioulasso. And this guy was really an interesting man. He had single-handedly negotiated the peace among 13 warring tribes in that country that allowed the country to be created. So he was a big hero in terms of the formation of the country. And on the property of his archiepiscopal residence in Bobo, he had a museum of African spirituality. A really good one, actually. And the Vatican hated this. They tried for years to get him to get rid of it. And he wouldn't do it. And he wouldn't do it for a very good reason, which he explained very eloquently to us. He said, human beings have two legs, and they need both legs to walk. In other words, I'm Catholic, yes, but I also have my traditional culture, and I need that also. And the two things have to walk side by side. One of the few Christian people who really thoroughly understood that idea. It was like the famous monk Bede Griffiths, the Benedictine monk who came from Umbria in Italy to found an ashram in India, in the south of India, called Shantivanam, which now is a yoga ashram, but it's also a Benedictine monastery. And whereas a lot of Catholics and other Christians came to India to convert people, Bede Griffiths had no such ambition. He wasn't there to convert anybody. He was just there to live the life of Benedictine monasticism and the sannyasa life side by side, two legs, and using both of them to walk towards divinity. I met this Archbishop in Bobo Dioulasso, and he's one of the few senior clerics that I've encountered where I was spontaneously moved to refer to him as Your Grace. And I called him Your Grace. He met us for a formal meeting with a group of Americans and a spiritual leader from India. He met us in his house coat. His archiepiscopal house coat with red piping on it and his house slippers, very informal. And he was very, very sweet guy. It was really, really a lovely, lovely meeting. That's what happens when you meet someone who has some spirituality about them. Your heart automatically bows down. And that's one way to know them. If Swami Veda or Swami Rama in their ongoing lives is going to cross your path, that's how you'll know who's in front of you. You'll feel your heart bow down automatically. You'll feel that impulse. You'll know by their presence who they are. You may not know them by name, but you'll know they're somebody important and you better listen. That's why I tell people all the time, tear up your pictures. Yeah, we were really attached to these personalities, but those forms are gone. Those forms have all been burned up or submerged in the Ganges. They don't exist anymore. And they're not going to come back in that form. So prepare yourself by understanding the presence. And then when the yogi crosses your path and says, "Do you not recognize me?" you'll be able to say, "Well, yeah, kind of. I don't know who exactly, but you're really familiar to me." And then you'll know. So Shantideva continues, "To Buddhas of the past, the present, and all future time, and to the doctrine and sublime assembly, with bodies as many as the grains of dust upon the ground, I will prostrate and bow. To shrines and all supports of bodhi-citta, I bow down." And those supports of bodhi-citta are those teachers in the form of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, all abbots who transmit the vows, all learned masters. Yeah. So she says in her commentary, there are many benefits to this practice. First and foremost, prostrations overcome arrogance. Trungpa Rinpoche used to say that because we have basic goodness, we can take pride in surrendering. We don't have to hang on to our accomplishments or good fortune. We can afford to be humble and bow down to those who embody wisdom, those courageous ones who worked hard so that the teachings still remain alive today. Second, prostrations connect us with our own sanity. In the presence of an extremely open, compassionate person, we can feel these qualities unfold in ourselves. How many of you had that experience with Baba or with Swami Veda? I think everybody can recognize feeling your own goodness open up in their presence. some seemingly separate person or object of veneration can awaken the clarity and freshness of our mind. Third, prostration serves as a way to overcome resistance and surrender our deeply entrenched neuroses and habits. He's coming into the whole business of confession, which we'll dip into starting at the beginning of the next class. Each time we bow, we offer ourselves our confusion, our inability to love, our hardness, and selfish ways. It's like opening our hands and saying, with this gesture, I willingly acknowledge how stuck I am. I surrender it all to the vast and compassionate heart of bodhi-citta. Until attaining the essence of enlightenment, I will take refuge in awakened mind. It brings you to the doorstep of confession. It allows you to look into a mirror where you can see the structure of your own mind that you ordinarily don't see. And this requires a relationship. You have to have a relationship for that to happen. It provides a mirror, maybe not a physical mirror, but it provides a relational mirror in which you can see more deeply into yourself. You know, one of the things that's really an interesting observation from the perspective of a profession in psychotherapy, you might think that, you know, we can just sort of do our own cognitive therapy, you know, think through our own thoughts and have a conversation with ourselves that's therapeutic. Well, maybe. But one of the things that happens very often when somebody is really struggling with something they can't quite get is that when they sit down with somebody who's really listening to them, all of a sudden the light goes on. They have a moment of recognition, a moment of pratyabhijna, as the Kashmir Shaiva yogis would say. A moment when you say, oh yeah, that's what that is. Okay, I get it now. And that's what confession should be. It should be an ability to sort of look into our mind and heart and see the things we're ordinarily disinclined to see. You know, somebody called me up from another country a couple weeks ago. He had gotten into a sexual liaison that was without any particular feeling. It was just sort of a habitual thing that he did. And it didn't mean anything in relationship terms to him. However, he was married to someone for whom this was the most painful thing he could possibly have done. And he absolutely blew his marriage to bits by doing that. Just destroyed his family life completely. And he called me up in tears. And he said to me in that conversation, I almost didn't have the courage to call you. I feel so ashamed of what I did. I don't have any control over this. And so I said to him, well, you did something really hard here. You looked into the mirror, or I should say, you're looking into the mirror at the moment, and you're seeing that you have a sexual addiction. And it fills you with shame. But something else happened here. You had the courage to look in the mirror and see what was there. You saw it. And you took in the truth. And that is not easy for anybody. There's a wonderful example in terms of recovery language of somebody hitting their bottom in life. And so in the process of working with this, and he has a good relationship with his wife, even though he hurt her terribly, and she knows she cannot continue with him. but they have a really good relationship in terms of parenting their mutual children, and that will continue. Thank God. Thank God there's that much forgiveness in the system. But we've started him on a path of recovery now. And that's the sort of thing that all of this business that Shantideva has been talking about, this opening up of generosity, this learning to share all the beauty that you see in the world with others, leading eventually into a kind of prostration where you surrender your sense of mamatva, of mineness, enough that you can look into the mirror and begin to see the things you ordinarily wouldn't want to see about how you fall short. You get a clear picture of the work that's yet to be done, which is a great gift and an act of considerable courage. And never, even though feelings of shame may come up because we're all very conditioned to feel that way, it's very important to keep your mindful balance in that moment and to remember that this is something that required some real courage on your part. You didn't look at it and explain it away. You didn't look at it and make excuses. You looked at it and you said, oh, I have a problem. This is a problem. Doesn't make you a bad person. It's just another example of somewhere where somehow you need to turn around. You need to repent. You need to move in a more mindful direction. You need to find a way to live your life more consciously and more compassionately. So we'll pick up this thread of confession the next time that we meet. When I set up the schedule for these next sessions, I put 6 of them in there, hoping that we can get pretty far along in the text. 3 of them in the next 3 weeks, and we'll take a break for Thanksgiving because I'm going to be out of town, and then come back in early December for the last 3. So thank you all for your kind attention. You know, I never exactly know where things are going to go in a given evening, and it's always a wonderful surprise. And I'm just so delighted to be able to share the experience with you all. It's beautiful, so beautiful.
Thank you, Stoma.
Most welcome. So let's take a moment to just come back into that cave of space and feel the wave of breath and prana that constantly refreshes this corpse and helps us to live here for a time. To know the beauty around us, to see the beauty in each other, and to make an offering of that beauty.
Thank you, Stoma.
That's Brahmarpanamastu. Sorry for the phone call. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good night.
Good night.